So long form is back completely. The front end of the process, whether it's a webinar, long form, VSL, we obviously still see short form stuff work too, to be fair. But yeah, dude, webinars are fully back.
You hammer them with content.
Yeah, we hammer the fuck out.
Once they book a call, they're just getting hammered with content. Because the difference was people were getting on the call, they were familiar with some of the basic strategies that were taught in the offer, and they just had a higher level of trust altogether. And
welcome in. We've got an absolute banger of a video for you here today. Whether you're new to the channel or already a subscriber, you're gonna meet one of my great friends, one of the people that I aspirationally look up to in business due to his standards. Okay, you don't meet a lot of people in business that have really high standards for how they operate. I'm expecting that this video will capture a fraction of that and put you onto some serious game. If you are new to the channel, all we talk about around here is hitting $1 million months. We don't make any income claims. By no means are we saying that you're gonna watch this video and make a fuckload more money. All we are saying though is that we're taking lessons from the deals that have been there, done that, and handed them down to you in the bite-sized clips and videos just like this. And if you're already a subscriber, it's a pleasure to have you here today. I mean, this is about as special as it gets. He's in town for the Inner Circle Mastermind that's this weekend. He's doing half the day on sales and I'm doing the other half of the day on marketing. So real special for the Inner Circle group. However, like I described, you're gonna get a fraction of what the Inner Circle members are gonna get in this video here today. So without further ado, let me give you a quick background on Josh. So Josh runs what do you even call it? Do you call it a sales organization?
yeah, it's funny because everyone calls it a sales agency.
Yeah,
I don't typically use that, but I'm an outsourced sales partner.
Yeah, so long story short, Josh is like, for everybody who doesn't know what this model is, it's essentially like a marketing agency, but for sales. And most of these people that run this model are absolute dipshits. Like they're awful, they have no proper sales management, they have no systems, they have no SOPs, they don't have any ability to recruit serious sales reps. And so what you end up getting is a lot of really like underperforming, generally very young reps that are just inexperienced and again, super awful in terms of the training that they get exposure to in the management. Josh does, again, without exaggeration, in any way, shape, or form, the greatest job out there. He's truly, okay, in a non-affiliated way. I do not get any money when I tell you to go work with Josh. Josh doesn't give me a kickback when I tell you to go work with him. It's very important you understand I'm solely telling you that this guy is the shit because of the standards and the level of deals that we have done together. There is truly nobody else that's done even remotely close to what this guy's done in the level that he operates at. So when you hear that he runs a sales agency, it's very important you understand this is as serious as it gets. This is truly the cream of the crop. And again, it's an honor to have Josh here today. What we're gonna do is just kind of shoot the shit and talk about some of the lessons that have gotten people to $1 million months, that sustain $1 million months. We're gonna talk about the good things, and we're gonna talk about some of the things that really frustrate us, you know, and hold deals back. So let's get started with this, because I think this is top of mind for both of us right now. What funnel do you currently prefer as a conversion mechanism above all others? If you could like rank, do like, we did a video that did really well on this channel, like an S tier list of like our most preferential version of a conversion mechanism all the way down to like the worst that we hate. What would be your top 3 that you just absolutely love right now?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I always say that funnels come in and out like clothing trends, right? We've talked about that because if you think back in the day when we first started working together, which was a lot of years ago, I mean, webinars was kind of the jam, you know, everybody loved webinars. And then it moved to VSLs. And, you know, really what happened, and I tell this story a lot, is as we kind of, you know, the industry progressed and then, you know, COVID hit, there's all the buying psychology changed. Everyone's in their house. There's nothing else to do. Ad costs were at an all-time low. People just needed so little in order to buy something.
That was such a sweet time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, when we first started working together, we're doing $25,000, $30,000 one-call closes, left and right, like it was nothing, just back to back
deals,
just back to back, you know, and it's changed since then, right? So we're kind of in a trust deficit, and I mean, it's really kind of obvious to see what happened. It's so easy to make money in this space that unfortunately the barrier to entry is so low. So you just get a bunch of people that don't know what they're talking about, that have really shitty fulfillment. They get into this space. So there's so many just bad experiences out there. Because of that, we're at an all-time trust deficit. And so really, it's just prioritizing trust, which is bringing back the content funnels. So, you know, webinar funnels we love. Now, when I say webinar, I'm not talking about low ticket. I'm talking about webinar where the...
we're never talking about low ticket, okay? Never, ever are we talking about low ticket.
Yeah, I don't even know what low ticket is. If I'm in the content, we're talking about high ticket. But yeah, it's like a webinar with a book a call as a call to action, right? Those are coming back with a vengeance. Those are really, really good. There's a couple of nuances though. We've seen some webinars on some of the deals we're doing that are different than the webinars that we used to do back in the day. So maybe we'll talk about that for a second. But anything that includes assets, content that builds trust is coming back again. It doesn't mean that VSLs can't work. We still sell on a lot of VSLs, and there is a reason that we like VSLs, but typically the conversion rate's going to be a lot lower than some of these content funnels.
Yeah, and we try not to use names on the channel so we can talk more in depth about the deals. Yeah. It's like, as an example, one of the recent deals that we launched, it was one of the first offer deals that we had taken on in a while that was at zero, and so with a very credible guy, to be fair, had already made a lot of money and other stuff. But he launched that with a 40-minute VSL.
Right.
So long form is back completely. It's the front end of the process, whether it's a webinar, long form, VSL. We obviously still see short form stuff work too, to be fair, supplements the process. But yeah, dude, webinars are fully back. Let's talk about this deal real quick that we did a while ago. There's a lot of people on the channel who have gotten exposure to the hammer them strategy.
Yep.
And we haven't had anybody do this on the channel yet. Where we sit down with somebody that we actively work with and they just give an honest perspective. So to be clear, and let's just not be biased, okay? Give your true and honest feedback. You had brought us into a deal back in July. Again, won't talk about the deal details so we can talk in depth about it. You had complained that prior to us coming into the deal, you had a really shitty, essentially lead quality, people were too early in the sales process. Yep. And to be fair, there were other reasons for that besides just us doing content marketing, the targeting, the lack of pixel conditioning, and all kinds of little nuanced things. But moral of the story, do you feel from a sales manager perspective that you got good feedback upon seeing the hammer them implemented into what you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to say something that I think is important here because, as Jeremy alluded to earlier, we're very close friends. But what's interesting about Jeremy is that we were not friends that started working together and worked together because we're friends. Yeah. We're only friends because how much we respect each other as we work together. In fact, if Jeremy sucked at what he does and if I sucked at what I do, we probably wouldn't be friends.
That's true.
That's just kind of how it goes. And so I will say, seriously, in all of the years that I've worked with Jeremy, every time that I have brought him into a deal, the cost per call just drops tremendously while maintaining or improving lead quality. It's always been like that. This specific deal he's referring to, it was something like 120, 130 costs per booked call, somewhere around there. I think it was as low as 90 at one point.
Application before we came in was in the mid 100s.
Yeah, it crept up quite a bit. It just kept going up. And then when you took over, it was $50. I mean, it dropped almost instantly, which was
per qualified call.
Per qualified call. Oh yeah, because we also changed it where the segmentation
around applications that were qualified and unqualified.
Yeah.
And obviously right away I was just from a pixel conditioning perspective, why are we sending back the turds? You don't want to send the donkeys back.
Right.
So we fixed all that. We only did the qualified people. But like I said,
I forgot about that. You're right, because that was the cost per call without any segmentation at all. Yeah, and then we put the segmentation just for qualified and it was $50 per qualified call, which by the way, just changes everything about the deal. Yeah. Actually, at some point we'll come back to it. I do want to talk about the economics of the entire funnel because it's actually a frustration of mine how little subject matter experts do math. Yeah. And it's let's come back to that because there's a lot of
roasted people on this channel for never doing math, dude. Nobody ever financial models. Yep. People track their numbers and they think that's what we're talking about. They're oh, I know my show rate. And we're no, dude, it's not what we're talking about.
I'll say something funny. And again, like Jeremy's right. It's not smart for us to use names. But recently, and Jeremy was on the call on a deal we're working on. It was really funny. But it took a couple of weeks to test this thing that they wanted to test that I told them it wouldn't work weeks prior. And I was basically something to the effect of I was asked how I knew it wouldn't work. And I was well, I put it in a spreadsheet in 5 minutes 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could do math, do math. It saves you so much time. But anyways, going back to your question. Sorry, Jeremy. So we were talking about the funnel and you're talking about the hammer them strategy. So hammer them strategy, and he'll explain it better than me. I always think it's funny. Jeremy has all these names and brands of strategies, but it's exactly that, right? You just hammer them. You hammer them with content.
Yeah, we hammer the fuck out of them.
Yeah, you hammer the fuck out of them. So essentially, what happens is once they book a call, they're just getting hammered with content, and it's hard to say other than because it's just qualitative, data, I guess you'd call it. but it was a drastic difference because the difference was people were getting on the call. They were familiar with the, the subject matter expert. They were familiar with some of the basic strategies that were taught in the offer. And they just had a higher level of trust altogether. And when somebody comes into a conversation, and I know it's so frustrating, by the way, for so many people in this industry, they say, well, why does that change it? Aren't you a salesperson? Like, just overcome. Remember we talked about that. Just overcome the objection.
Yeah, dude. Josh, and like any sales team for that matter, like most of the things that salespeople deal with are just getting thrown under the bus. To be fair, there's plenty of salespeople who throw anybody but themselves under the bus.
Yeah.
And you want to avoid that at all costs. Like one thing I think Josh and I do really well is we don't get into like the sales versus marketing beef. It's like when you give feedback, I take it like it's my problem to solve.
Yep.
And vice versa. I try to, in some instances, provide you guys feedback that I feel like you guys do an exceptional job with attempting to apply. Like, I'll give you a great one as an example. There is a call that, and by the way, Josh himself is scaled to the point where he doesn't have to be involved in every deal that he does, and his operation is still flawless. It's still levels, like not even close. It's like comparing Drake to that Kendrick beef. It's like they're not even in the same fucking league, dude. Drake's like the greatest artist of all time. Different argument though. The point I'm trying to make though is Josh has these incredible staff that he puts on accounts. And one of the calls I was actually on earlier today on an account you're on, we had gotten to the point where, listen how crazy this is. Mm-hmm. So if you took the NASDAQ from April 1st to today, which is currently April 10th while we film this, it's been an absolute bullwhip from all these tariff announcements. It's so much volatility. Like the market has swung thousands of points in a day.
Right.
Within like a span of 4 days, it nuked like 4,000 points. Went up 1,000 points, down 1,000 points, rebounded 3,000 points. Listen to this correlation right here. Mm-hmm. The cost per call in this account, okay, went from mid hundreds while the market was high. As soon as the market nuked 4,000 points within that 48-hour span, the cost per call at the market's lowest was $1,111.90.
Holy crap.
Yep. Now listen to this. Market rebounded 1,000 points. Cost per call went to 380. Market nuked the next day because of more tariff announcements. Went back into the 400s. Market then rebounded 3,000 points. Cost per call went to 180 again. Most recently, literally as of today, yesterday was a 3,000 point rebound. Today, there wasn't a lot of like tariff news. It stabilized back in like 120, 180 range, give or take the time of day that we looked at it. And then I shared that to that client. I said, your lack of context in advertising and not talking about this right now and being the certainty that people need in this kind of environment is causing these like literal rips that are directly correlated to the market fluctuations with what you talk about, what you teach when you sell people.
That's crazy.
I shared that with your sales team. And I said, you guys obviously have to bring this up on sales calls. You guys have to like essentially directly talk about the fact that people are clearly making buying decisions, opt-in decisions, booking calls relative to a market and where the market's at. Yep. And where the news is like trending them to think and like whether they're getting put into that like recession mindset. Your sales management that you staffed onto that particular account like immediately took that feedback and was like, yeah, absolutely, we got to train the guys on this. And that specific sales manager that you have, she also then said she was going to go share that with the other sales managers that you have staffed because we're likely seeing that on more than just that single deal. It was just so correlated in that one deal. But my point being, okay, this is where most people fall into a pit. They do the sales versus marketing thing. And instead of having like a nice
it's always a blame
effort,
game.
yeah, you just fucking blame each other and you end up going in circles, which doesn't progress anything in deals. So anyway, let's get to a different question.
Well,
okay?
just to comment to that real quickly, though, and I appreciate the compliments there, man. You know, the transferable value that we built is something I take a lot of pride in. It takes such an extreme amount of effort to build a system and to build a machine that operates the same way that you would when you're on a plane flying to Miami. You know, so I appreciate the compliment. But, you know, one thing I would say, too, about that is I tell everybody this, like, when they're coming into an engagement with us, I say, dude, I'm not a magic pill solution. Like I have the same problems as everybody else. We're just better at solving them. Yeah. And that's the whole thing with sales operations. I feel like so many people, even clients that we have, they're just waiting and they're searching and they're reaching for that place that you get to where you all of a sudden have no more problems and you're never going to get there. I've been in sales ops for a long time, man, a long time. There's always problems on the other side of the corner. So it's just like, how fast can you react? How systematized are you? How standardized is the way that you solve them? And that's what makes great sales management, is just being able to identify and diagnose what the actual problem is, the root analysis of it, and then just immediately going into problem solving mode.
Dude, we did a whole video on this channel of like what $1 million month earners have. It's like characteristics and traits and like their mental models that they use and just how they are as people. And one of those specific traits was like the speed in which they solve problems.
Yeah,
you know?
It's like the most important. In sales ops, it's the most important. In fact, tomorrow at the mastermind, or Saturday, sorry, I'm going to go into like a whole thing on like just knowing and having confidence in exactly what problem to solve. Because that's half of the battle, is people just keep solving the things that aren't even the right problem in this space, and it's crazy. But I want to say one more thing and you could go to the next subject. So you're talking about the market, what you're seeing in the stock market, tariffs, all this stuff. I don't know anything about the stock market. I keep the main thing. I don't get distracted. Couldn't tell you a thing. I don't even know what's going on in the news right now. Maybe that's not good. That's just what I do, man. I could tell you what happened, in the environments that I stay in. But what I'll say is, and I've been saying this for a long time, when you have like a biz op, right, in the high ticket space that you're selling, people need to understand you're competing with everything. Like seriously, I was actually listening to an interesting podcast today. Jeremy knows I love M&A. I love mergers and acquisitions. And I was listening to this episode on a podcast where this guy was talking about just different levels of problems of awareness. It was a very random thing. And what I'm relating it to is people need to understand your prospects, your leads, don't give a shit what you actually do. They just want to achieve a certain desired result. Yeah. And what's really cool about having an outsourced sales agency is I have this really unique perspective where I can see like essentially buying behavior across a lot of brands. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a deal on one brand get lost and buys this other thing on another brand that we have. And they're like not even related at all. Yeah. It's like somebody's looking at buying a business and then they like buy this Airbnb offer. Yeah. Or like, it's just, they're never the same. And the point is, interesting, they don't care what it is. They want to make more money. They want to change, they hate their job. It doesn't matter.
Some type of outcome.
So they just want an outcome. Yeah. And they're just trying to evaluate like what's the best way that gives me the highest level of confidence that I'll achieve this outcome. And I say that because you're talking about the stock market and all this shit going on. It lowers probability for everything they're evaluating. Yeah, and so people need to start thinking about it like that, because a lot of people give me an offer. Okay, co-living real estate. They think, what are the other co-living real estate offers out there? And we need to compete against them. But it's like, dude, you're competing against everything. You got to articulate why your specific strategy is better than starting a vending machine route. Yeah. Seriously, because they're just looking, they don't care what it is. Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's like, as an example, if you owned a McDonald's and you thought you were only competing against Burger King and like Taco Bell and the other random fast food places, you're just actually competing against hunger.
You're competing against all alternatives. Yeah. Or look at it like
Restaurants, this. 7-Eleven hot dogs, like fucking a snack.
Cooking at home.
Literally anything.
It made me actually think about it like this, right? Like imagine you're buying a franchise. Huh? Like, okay, let's just pretend for a second you're buying a restaurant franchise. Yeah. Nobody gives a shit what the restaurant is. They're just looking at the numbers. Like, what's going to make more money? What do I like better as a strategy? That's all they look at.
No, it makes so much sense. So tell the people this, okay? One thing that almost everybody who watches this channel does is they sell something high ticket, some kind of high ticket product or service, and it ranges so widely, okay? Yeah. And they all deal with relatively like similar patterns and problems amongst themselves, even though they sell different stuff. They have call funnels, they do webinars, they do DM strategies. Some of them sell low ticket to high ticket. Some of them are stuck just doing organic and they're trying to like convert to paid. In your perspective, just from like getting an account and seeing it absolutely fucking rip right away. Mm-hmm. If you had to tell somebody just has any high ticket product or service, okay, doesn't matter the market, what is the number one funnel you prefer above all else?
I mean, right now it'd be very hard to not say webinars.
Yeah, dude, totally agree.
I mean,
webinars are ripping right now.
We just do so many millions of dollars a month through webinars. And the thing is, it's just such a high leveraged funnel. It's a one-to-many model.
Yeah.
And you could you're not doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a day on a VSL call funnel. You're just not. Fair. It doesn't mean you're not having good numbers. It doesn't mean that you can't have a great ROAS. It doesn't mean it can't be successful, but you're not going to have a multi-million-dollar weekend.
Yeah.
You're just not.
Yeah, because again, like you still have deals that do call funnels that do extremely well, and then you also have deals like anybody does that has call funnels that just shit the bed, give or take the market. But anyway, look, listen, we did a video on this channel called "Webinars Are Back," and
I saw that. Yeah,
dude, I loved talking about it, because when we had made that video, we'd come out with this long, like 72-page SOP on mastering webinars, and at the time we have a deal currently where I'm a consultant on this specific deal and you're the sales agency, and they had increased their frequency of webinars from once a month to twice a month. And we have a different account together where I'm the advertiser and you're the sales agency, where they do twice a week webinars comparatively, but they go strictly cold.
Yeah.
The accounts that have the ability to do higher frequency webinars right now, we're seeing a trend where if they're doing them exclusively to warm audiences, they have a limited frequency and obviously a limited scale.
The cost is so much higher.
Right, and to be fair, like most people think, okay, well, warm audiences are what I'm going to be restricted to due to the fact that, my sales team needs like hotter leads.
Yeah.
Okay. Comparatively, we got that guy doing twice a week webbies to totally cold audiences.
Well, because in a webinar, like it doesn't really matter how cold they are. Like they're not at the end of the webinar. Right?
Good.
I'm just saying, like, that holds true if you're just driving traffic into a call funnel. But like, I don't care how cold the traffic is. You put them through a multiple hour webinar.
Yeah,
it's like they're not cold anymore. You know.
Plus, so in that model that you described with the twice a week webinars, you know what they're also doing?
Long webinars.
The fucking hammer them campaign.
Yeah.
So they get people to opt in. They absolutely hammer the shit out of them with content. They show up to the webinar, multiple hour webinar. And
that's the key.
Then they hand them off to a sales team that does an exceptional job at representing the offer, the value of the offer, the brand that they're selling on behalf of. And you could sell completely into cold audiences when you have that type of flow. Most people on this channel, the thing they suck at the most is cold audience traffic. Like they're just awful at cold audiences. They don't understand that game at all. Now, to be clear, from a sales perspective, do you think, like, could you tell these people straight up, do you only launch with warm audiences, or do you also launch with cold too and kind of mix it in? Do you go just cold?
I mean, I'll just tell you this, like, I can't even tell the difference who's cold or warm on a webinar lead. I couldn't tell you, like, you couldn't pay me enough money to guess it.
Yeah.
Bingo. I don't know, but here's what I will say though. I wanted to make a couple comments around some of the nuances that we're seeing in webinars, because they are different in some of these strategies that they're using. But even before I say that, like, one thing about scaling a high ticket offer is like, just freaking try. Like, you know how many people, here's what I mean. You know how many freaking clients tell us all day long how much money they want to make, and they're not even willing to do a 2-hour webinar? And it's just like, it's like, what do you mean? What do you even mean? And it's crazy. It's like, I think that's a big difference. Like, if you get into this space and you start an offer and you think it's passive income, you don't have to run a business, it's going to be really freaking hard to scale. But like, so dude, we're working with these guys. Like, listen, I have a lot of respect for every client I work with. I do. And I'm very grateful for anyone who trusts us enough to run their sales team. But I'll tell you this, and I don't mean it in a rude way. Well, I don't mean it in a rude, well, no, I'm saying this about the ones that are having success right now. Like, the amount of money these guys are making, and you would never freaking know who the hell they are. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about, like, some of these people have like the worst personalities. Let me qualify that. They're just
not good at making content.
They're not good at making content. They're not charismatic.
We work with like actual all-stars, like the top of the top for most of these niches, which are like super charismatic, great on camera.
Oh, we work with some that are like quite literally superstars. Like, these are like the best content makers in the world. But I'm just saying, sometimes the person that's not charismatic, that sucks at content, that just like isn't really that good at much of anything, can crush their numbers because they're like, yeah, you want to do a webinar a week? Done. 2 a week? Tell me when.
Yeah.
And they just keep laying it out there. And so, Jeremy and I were working on this one deal together, and I don't know what it was. I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it's ego, laziness, literally couldn't tell you. But we told this person to do webinars for the longest times. I'm talking about like a lot of months. They were stuck at a few $100,000 a month. They started doing the webinars. They're at $900 a month within, I think it was the second month.
Yeah, no, I know what you do. Yeah, no, you're
in the second month.
It went from 400 to literally you cracked 900 within the month, and that didn't take 2 months. That took a literal month.
You're right, because we did 2 webinars, but they were like a couple weeks apart. But by the second webinar,
one was at the tail end of the month, so it technically would have been $1 million a month deal. And it wasn't that month because, again, I only got to 900.
Well, even in March, same thing with March. So that's another funny thing. Like okay, let me just get on a soapbox real quick.
That's a good deal to highlight too for some of the mistakes that they make, because like now they're fucking up, and we can talk about that next.
Yeah, we can. But let's talk about one of the mistakes that like just really drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I had somebody, I'm going to start with the quote, and I hope I remember it. He said something to the effect of, all right, what's the difference between someone who makes $200,000 a year and someone who makes $1 million a year? A mentor asked me this one time. What's the difference?
Couldn't tell you.
Most people say 800 grand. That's the difference. He said, no, 4 years. He said they both made $1 million. It just took one person 5 years to make it and the other person 1 year. And I was like, okay, interesting. What do you mean by that? Like make this connect the dots. He goes, it's all about the amount of time. Like that's all it is. If you want to make more money, it's just about taking the same amount of money and shrinking it and collapsing it into shorter periods of time.
Yeah, so true.
And what was interesting about that, this was the first analogy that came to mind for me, is like, think about these clients sometimes with the webinars and the funnels that they want to launch. So if you want to, let's just pretend, easy math, you have a webinar that does 500 grand a webinar, and you want to do 500 grand a month. But you do the webinar like every 5 or 6 weeks. Like this is what happens. And you look at it over the course of the year, and it's, I can't do the math there, but it's like you're making 350 grand a month, not 500, because you're doing it 6 weeks apart. Yeah. And my point is this, not only the speed of action, but the timing of these things is crazy to me, how much money people lose on the table just simply by not being intentional around when they launch these things.
We had a deal recently, tell me what you think about this, where we took them from 100,000 a month in January of 2024. They finished December of 2024 at $1 million a month. It was a huge jump, okay? And where they sat at the end of March, this most recent month that just concluded, was 1.4 cash collected, okay? Wow. And it's all off of one funnel, call funnel. Okay, wow. Pure VSL, just straight up call funnel. They do a 2-call close on top of that to add to the friction. Okay, 15K offer, 25K offer, 5K offer, and one of the most interesting things on that specific account is there's no speed to doing some of these other conversion mechanisms that I've been throwing out there, like pushing them to do webinars, pushing them to do low ticket to high ticket, and it just leaves so much money on the table. But I think here's the point I'm trying to make. I think a lot of these people don't have urgency.
Yeah,
because
you're segueing into a good topic here for a second.
Hear me out. They don't have urgency because they think that the growth potential is just there forever. And this specific business that I'm highlighting is a perfect example of this. Okay, they have a huge macro trend that's currently playing into their favor. Okay, like the population of planet Earth is increasingly biasing towards what they sell and the outcome they sell, and people are just naturally joining into participating into their market. They get more in-market demographic buyers by the day, just from a global trend that they have no influence over, that they're essentially just selling into. Yep. And I've seen this collapse deals before where they're above that $1 million a month threshold, and they don't operate with urgency and aggression, and they just think that it's just there for the taking forever. Yeah. And when you talk about compressing timelines, I get so up these people's asses where I'm like, dude, you have to press so much harder than what you are right now, and you have to get the fact that as soon as that macro trend reverses, you're fucking cooked. It's like the example I provided earlier with talking about the fluctuation in the cost per call relative to where the market's at. Yep. It's like, well, they don't control any of that. And imagine if the market consistently tanked, what that would do to their cost per call. Imagine what that would do to their buyer, especially since that specific client, as you know, they're not filming new ads for me at a high frequency. You know, it's hard to get that client to do stuff and prioritize things. But again, my point is, okay,
it's the speed.
It's like, dude, they just don't like realize
and Jeremy,
that they have to grab it. You know, they have to act with aggression to hit those
This is really
numbers,
important.
You know?
I think we should talk for a second on just like characteristics of like what we see, even in the brands we work with, and which makes them successful and whatnot. Because it's actually really interesting. Like we could talk about all the sales and marketing strategies, and I'm sure we will do a lot more of that in a second here. But like, it almost makes me take it to like mindset for a second, because like
Dude,
the mindset
it's the biggest part of it.
It's insane to me. So like, all right, let me tell you something, okay? If you want to make a shitload of money in your business, and you want to be rich, you cannot, sounds bad for a second, but hear me out. You can't put somebody who doesn't make a lot of money in charge of those making money decisions. Because it reminds me when I first got into sales, right? Like it reminds me, I'll go back a decade here. When I would sell something to businesses, I would compare that price point to like how much money it was to me.
Yeah.
Like $5,000. Who's going to pay me $5,000? Because $5,000 seemed like a lot of money to me when I first started out.
Yeah.
But to these businesses, like if you took my earnings, if you took the 5K against my earnings at that time, and you took the business I was selling to, and you took the 5K against their earnings, it was like the equivalent of like a penny to them, like a dime maybe, you know, it was nothing. And so we project what we feel something is onto this, and it now puts somebody in your business that's making decisions like that. So many times, you know, we see these decisions being made where it's time to scale. You have all the indicators. You have nothing but upside. And people with a lot of scarcity that are fear-based, they don't make those decisions because it's a lot of money to them, or it's a lot of risk to them. And we're sitting here like, what the hell? This is your chance. Like triple the budget today, now. It's crazy how much money people lose just because of that right there.
Triggered a lot of trauma in me there.
It's crazy.
Being a pussy, okay? We talk about this on the channel a lot. We call it, you got to put your balls on the table. You got to know, I always compare advertising to gambling, where I say, look, when you walk into the casino, okay, the ultimate goal is you have the money you walked in with, okay? You gamble it, you get that money out, you put it in your pocket, and then from there you're playing with house money. Even once you just get to that point, where you're officially playing with house money, it changes the risk on versus risk off scenario mentally, like drastically. But most people don't have like these kind of like if this then that scenarios to think with, to know when it's time to press,
not even
and when it's time to pull the chips off the table.
It's not even just the guardrails. They use no logic.
Yeah, there's no fucking math. Nobody does financial modeling, you know?
Yeah, it's not. There's not like a spreadsheet to be like, you know, because it's one thing to assess risk.
Yeah.
You say, you know, I'm a big fan of financial modeling. I spend a lot of my time in spreadsheets. I get made fun of for it, in fact. But I like to see best case, base case, and bear case, right?
Yeah.
Best case.
We call it
your
good,
upside.
great, and intolerable. That's what I've taught them.
Great. For me, it's best is the upside, base case is my best guess, and bear case is the worst realistic scenario.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize it's the worst realistic scenario. Not, I'm going to go bankrupt. That's not realistic. So
that's no scenario that anybody would want to put you in. You know, it's just a conservative scenario.
What's a realistic worst case scenario in this thing you're doing? So a lot of these freaking, you know, companies, it's insane. They're not looking at a spreadsheet. They're just like, whoa, that's a lot of money. Don't do it.
Do like cost per call go from like 150 to 250, and they'll be like, shut everything off, like scale it back. And then the people who are doing math like us, we're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like your ROAS went from like a 9-to-1 to like a 6-to-1. That doesn't mean risk off. Like, no, we're still pressing the gas. We're just going to try to fix some of the things that cause that to inflate. That's one of the things that drives me up a wall when we're scaling deals.
Yeah.
Like people act like ROAS and a lot of these KPIs are static numbers. And in reality, they're not static numbers. They fluctuate, and you have to scale through regardless. You have to know when you push.
I'll say why right here.
When you stay stagnant and when you kind of pull back a little bit.
I have a lead magnet that I was marketing a while back. And I talk about this concept, just like tactics for rapid scaling, because you just said the key, no pun intended, but you said the key term right there. You said KPI, key performance indicators. Most people do this. What they don't do, what they fail to do, is calculate what I call MSIs, minimum scaling indicators.
Yeah.
You could have your targets all day long, but if you're missing your target, does it mean shut things off and stop? No. What is the minimum, indicators that you need to hit to continue to scale?
Yeah.
And if your goal could be this high if you want, but if you're hitting here and you're still hitting the minimum level of acceptable profitability, keep scaling.
Josh, quick plug with me real quick. Tell the people what you're going to cover at the mastermind this week and give them some insight, because what you're talking about right now puts them on game to what they need to do. At the mastermind, are you actually going to go in depth on how to do these things?
Yeah, I am. So tomorrow or Saturday, I've done a lot of, this is my fourth, we were just talking about it today. I think this is the fourth time I've spoke at your mastermind over the years, which is really cool.
You're one of the most requested speakers that we consistently get to come back and drop more game on us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. And I just try to show up and give as much value as I possibly can. A lot of the times it's on all of these. It's like scaling strategy, rapid scale. I do a lot of stuff on financial modeling. In Q4 last year, I was breaking down a budget, and I was really getting business owners to understand return on invested capital, how to collapse timeframes with reinvestment strategies. Just like kind of the financial backbone of scaling a business, not just focusing on sales. And that's a big distinction between me and the way that I operate my business compared to a lot of sales agencies out there. A lot of sales agencies are ran by a sales guy. Being good at sales does not make you a great operator. It doesn't make you a good business owner. It doesn't make you a good CEO. Yeah. And so I like to really, in a lot of my content, I like to break it down to a level of like, what is actually going on behind the scenes? Because it's not just sales, it's sales operations. And sometimes those things matter a lot more than what a rep is saying on the phone. Yes. So I really peel back the curtain and I talk about that stuff. Now, this weekend specifically, I'm really excited about a presentation called High Output Sales Leadership. So I'm basically going to break down our entire sales management motion. And it's in depth. It's a lot of detail.
And it's something that you won't see because you're not in the inner circle yet. So listen, twice a month one-on-one calls, weekly group calls. We do quarterly in-person masterminds, just like what you're hearing about now, where you get put onto the real game, okay? And by the way, we also have a group chat full of rich people trying to get a hell of a lot richer. And Josh is one of those people that participates in the group chat. And you're really active, by the way. Thank you very much for that.
I like to be active in there. What I think is crazy is when people invest to be in these masterminds and then they don't participate, because I'm there to give value. I'm like, any time that there's a conversation I could plug into, I try to. But I also I'm a really big believer of this. I don't say shit to something I don't know about. If I don't know what it is, I don't respond to the conversation at all. I just observe.
No, that's part of the learning experience, and it also peppers into the last point of what comes with it, which is Jeremy AI. Jeremy AI, you get to talk to for the things you want to know, and then there's all types of information you get exposed to, whether it's through the group chat, whether it's through masterminds, all the course content that you get access to, just shy of 1,000 videos. Check out the link in the description. There are qualifications you have to meet in order to enable yourself to buy into it. We will not let you in there if you're poor. We will not let you in there if you're not making enough money. We have little red flags we look out for. Like I said, if you're a pussy, we will not let you in there, because every single thing that we advise you to do in there requires you to put your balls on the table in different degrees. Sometimes you got to leave them on there, have some serious exposure. You're taking risks, okay? And if you're unable to take risks, it's not the right thing for you. Some of the other offers down in the descriptions might be better off for you. Anyway, back to the conversation. One thing that I really want to highlight that I think you provide a tremendous amount of insight and value into is the things that frustrate us about some of these deals, okay? Like, we've seen people that finally start doing the right things, okay? And a combination of what you've said, like they'll have some third worlder that starts to make random decisions in the account, or they'll have like somebody who's like a low-level B or C player in the team that's on these calls with like revenue decisions and like what things should do that just occupy your time and like detract the business and ultimately cause, like in some instances, months of contraction or like stagnancy. If you could just give some insight to people. I'm a very direct person. Josh is a little more conservative with how he communicates comparatively to me. and he'll likely give you a more polished version of what I consistently harp on you guys about. But I would love to hear your perspective on this. If you could just give some insights, like that mental side of things, for like how to run a company. I constantly talk about A players, and I have seen in deals that we actively participate in, a random B or C player cause fucking months of randomness, chaos, turmoil, contraction, and then you and I are sitting here like aggressively trying to regain control of the deal. And the business owners like listen to obviously all their staff that they hired because they trust them and they don't want to view them like a B or C player, but ultimately a lot of these people are. What's your perspective on just that alone of like who should be making decisions in these companies and how that's affecting deals?
Yeah, well, you know, it's such a big topic. It's such a, I mean, so many thoughts come to mind. I mean, here a couple things that I've said recently come to mind for me. I told a client this, and like you said, I do pride myself on having healthy, productive communication. You know, that's important to me. Like with these, when I'm partnering in these deals, like I'm a partner, and I look at ourselves like that. We're not some vendor. And sometimes I need to remind these people how well I know what to do, right? Like how good I am at what I do. And I try to not just like over credentialize, and I don't want to lead every conversation with, hey, you know how much we did in sales last month? I don't want to say that.
I've watched your statistics grow month over month on certain accounts. Meanwhile, they're absolutely dragging you through the mud, thinking that you're performing like shit. And in actuality, your revenue's gone up. Their closing statistics. And
it's because people react to feelings and things they see or hear. I'll give you a good example of this. I had a client tell me to fire a rep because she listened to a call. This person listened to a call, and this person said that I hate how that rep sounded on the call. And I said, okay, I can certainly do that. I want you to know that's the best rep on your account. It's just like, it made no sense to me. I'm like, you want me to fire the best? Like, and that's a perfect example of somebody that has none of the information or data saying to make a firing decision. And by the way,
of one call?
I mean, I didn't ask how many calls was it. All I know is that it wasn't even, by the way, brand reputation super important. If you get some asshole on the phone and they're only the best rep because they're just slamming deals and
like that super unethical team that we saw recently. Remember that? Dude, that would turn that deal into an FTC hotbed of bullshit, dude. That was the most like toxic deal I think we've ever walked into.
Yeah, that was crazy. Well, so my point is, I'm not saying performance at all costs by any means, and you know that. That's really important to me, integrity-based sales, being compliant. But my point is, it wasn't any of that. This individual that I'm referring to just didn't like the style of the sales rep. Yeah. Like basically described as like, I wouldn't sell it like that. And my response was like, I don't care how you would sell it because you don't sell anything. Like this person's phenomenal, right? And so, you know, it's frustrating. I had a conversation with somebody else, which again, it was a productive conversation. We had a good outcome, but I had to tell this person, I said, listen, this is outsourced sales, not outsourced C-suite. Like there's no one running your guys' company, you know, and that happens a lot too. Like we come in to own a certain function of the business, which is sales. And a lot of the times, if we're sales and we're running that, maybe you're media buying and you're doing the marketing agency thing, and then maybe there's someone else in-house. It could be a lot of different roles. I mean, let's just call it a brand manager, whatever you want to call it. That person here's where it gets confusing when you're using outsourced people. And this is advice to anyone that wants to outsource. True advice. I'm not saying this because it benefits me or because I'm biased. Like I'm trying to help you not lose a shitload of money because I see it over and over and over again. If you have like a marketing agency or you outsource sales to a group like me, somebody like us, just because somebody is our point of contact does not make them our direct report. Does that make sense? Like what we fall into this thing where like there will be somebody who's not experienced to like tell us what to do as an example. And they might own the status call. And if they're an internal resource, all of a sudden it's like they're telling us what to do. And you have to understand when I say this, I try really hard to be right sized. I'm not saying this out of arrogance. I'm certainly not saying this out of ego.
Yeah.
You hired me because I know how to do it better than you.
Yeah, it's so true.
Don't hire us and then tell us what to do. Now, collaboration's really important. Yeah. I want people's feedback. And by the way, I don't want to be right. I want to be rich. I do not care whose idea wins.
I say I don't want to be right. I just want to make money.
That's all I care about. So I want to hear everyone's opinion. I want the feedback. I want the collaboration. I'm a big fan of there's no stupid ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Like let's brainstorm all of them. But at the end of the day, if you can't trust the people that you put in place to do the job that you're paying them to do, what's the point of the relationship?
Yes,
and that's a big thing that you're saying right now, Jeremy, where it's like, I've just seen it. And again, I just want to say for a second, I'm very grateful that most of our relationships, they do give us a tremendous amount of trust. It's important that because it almost sounds like we're bagging on them. And I just want to clarify, most all of our relationships, my relationships, they give us a tremendous amount of trust. And by the way,
same here.
Trust is earned, right? Totally. So it's earned, it's not given from day one. But the reason I say that is because I stay away from deals that don't have the ability to trust. Yeah. Because then it's like, dude, it's just such a waste of time.
Yeah, so true. And just to be clear as well, for the B and C players having influence in revenue driven conversations, or the person that you had mentioned listened to a sales call and wanted to fire one of your reps.
Yep.
They aren't necessarily doing it in any way, shape, or form from an ill-intended perspective. Obviously, their goal is not to contract the revenue of the business and lose the company money.
Right.
The moral of the story is that's the thing with most of these people that have.
I can't think of a single person we work with that has bad intentions. They all have good intentions.
Absolutely not. It's like that classic quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly.
They aren't trying to actively fuck up or derail the deal. However, they just don't have as much deal exposure. That's one of the most interesting things that I think that we bring to the table from both your sales side and my marketing side is because we've been there, done that. We have a degree of experience and perspective and awareness around things that can really amplify the fuck out of a deal and just absolutely derail it at the same time and just cause catastrophic failures. And again, not trying to rag on B and C players. They're necessary for organizations, give or take the organization. And again, influence in revenue-driven conversations.
Yeah.
Where very important top-line revenue conversations, net revenue conversations, improvement-oriented conversations. That's where I've witnessed firsthand, especially from an outside perspective looking at your business, people just drag you that causes, contraction and just a lot of friction in relationships comparatively. Yeah. So, it's interesting to comment on. Okay, go higher level with me real quick. You ready?
Yeah.
So, you get into an account.
Just to close that, because I think for people, and I have to do this just to protect me for a second.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
For people who don't know what you meant by that, they're probably thinking well, why is he getting dragged so much? I think it's important to say this. What you mean by that is when it comes to sales, there's a lot of things that people will approach us with, and it will very quickly be turned around once they have the data and the context is the point. Yeah. I'll give you an example.
It's a narrative that develops.
These narratives develop, and here's a really good example, right? In high ticket sales, oftentimes there's a sales cycle. It's an offline conversion. There's lagging indicators. So we will have people freak out if they don't have revenue in a certain amount of time. This amount of time, I want to let you know, was made up in their head on what amount of time was normal to make the money that they expected for some reason. And so often we have to show them, well, based on the data, here's the average sales cycle. So we're actually pacing perfectly. Yeah. Right. And if we're pacing perfectly based on the sales cycle, and we have a forecast, a revenue forecast in the CRM, maybe nothing's wrong. And that's exactly the thing, Jeremy, is they project these things that don't actually have any merit.
It's random shit they make up.
A lot of the times it is. There are
certain instances, to be fair, where there is some data that they've historically gone on. But dude, company narrative, I've talked about that on this channel a lot. Narrative alone can cause huge rifts in an organization's progress, their expansion versus contraction comparatively. Okay, so anyway, higher level, you come into an account, okay? You're officially handed off, and we come across accounts just as you do that are handing off go ahead, what?
I thought of one really good example I wanted to share.
Yeah, go ahead.
And after this, Jeremy, after you say your thing, I would love to give some advice on kind of like how to work with sales companies and marketing. There's a couple of good topics here.
Let it rip.
But I have one really good topic, okay? There are times where, you know, we have a sales roster and there's some reps that are outperforming others. And this is actually a very common question I get all the time. I'm actually going over this in a lot more detail at the Inner Circle this Saturday.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you know when to fire somebody, a sales rep specifically?
Yeah.
It's very subjective in most cases. Now, I teach something to our leadership team called conditional logic-based performance management, which basically is like, if X, then Y. Because I want to remove all subjectivity so I could scale decision making. Do I want leaders that can't critically think? No, of course not. But I want them to spend their critical thinking on things that can't be standardized. So one really good example of this is, let's say that I have a sales team. I'm going to make up numbers, and let's say that a bunch of the sales reps are 15 to 20% close rate. And let's say there's a couple reps that are 10% close rate. Now, the immediate reaction for somebody who isn't sophisticated in sales ops and is lacking all the data is fire them. Fire them immediately. Fire them yesterday, if not sooner, right? And now, here's the thing though. When you actually look at the data, and so we have something we call a scoreboard, which is all the individual reps metrics. One metric that I really focus on, and so, you know, if you run a sales team even internally, I would recommend looking at this, is something called GDPBC and then CDPBC, right? It's a lot of letters. It stands for gross dollars per booked call and collected dollars per booked call. Okay, because what happens is people look at most people when they manage sales teams are looking at show rate, close rate. Most people stop at that. Actually, most people, quick side tangent, and I'll circle back to the point. The amount of times I've gone into a deal with somebody telling me that they have who their best rep is, the amount of times that was not even close to their best rep is insane. Yep. Because all they looked at is close rate. They weren't looking at show rate, which takes into consideration follow-up and all of these other things. They weren't looking at average sales price, so maybe they're closing a bunch of little baby deals. They weren't looking at collections, so maybe they're closing a bunch of bullshit payment plans.
I fucking hate when people operate off revenue instead of cash collected.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it. Don't even get me started. But the point is that doesn't tell the whole story. So I really look for, in all areas of my business, what are called keystone metrics.
Yeah.
What are some metrics that tell the entire equation with one metric? Gross dollars and collected dollars per booked call will do that for you, because it takes into consideration everything: show rate, close rate, average sales price, collections rate. So think about this for a second, and here's my point of like why you really want to know your numbers and let the data make the decision for you. If my sales team is at 20% in this example, and then a couple of reps are at 10%, okay? But let's say that the cost per call, I'm going to ask you this question. Let's say the cost per call is $50, okay? $50 cost per call. And the collected dollars per booked call on the low performing reps that were only closing at 10% close rate was, call it $400.
I'm pressing the scale button.
You're keeping them because I'm loading them up, especially dude. For marketers out there, right? You're so used to looking at ROAS, return on ad spend. This is how you would look at ROAS on an individual rep performance basis. Yeah. And this is what I look at. So now hear me out. Do I want to try to either A, develop those reps to get closer to the other reps' performance? Of course, I'm not an idiot. Yeah. Or do we want to eventually hire somebody that can outperform them? Yeah. Again, we aren't idiots. Yeah. But to immediately fire that person, even though they are perceived to be drastically lower performing, and they are comparatively, you're just losing so much money because that's a tremendous ROAS. You're paying $50 for a call, they're returning $400. Yeah. That's an 8x ROAS. And I see it day after day after day because a lot of the times it happens with these like really, really cheap call funnels, and they're not making that comparison. Last thing, Jeremy, and I'll pass it to you. Last thing I was going to say is So you have to look at that. But the last thing I was going to say is the only time, now this is important, the only time you may want to fire that person, even if that metric is really healthy, is if you're not at full capacity. Because now you're losing money and opportunity cost because you could fill the top performing calendars. So if
you're making that amount of money, like you'd scale into it regardless.
You should scale regardless. But that's the only caveat
that these people make. They don't try to fill up those closers' calendars because they're at a lower, as you said, like set of metrics collectively compared to the best people. And you know what they do, dude? I have a guy. He's actually in the inner circle, and this is one of the decisions that I consistently harp on him on because it's been like 4 months of him making this type of decision. He has one rep, literally one, closes 33%. Every single rep that he hires after that, 15%. Mm-hmm. Is he still profitable on the reps that close 15%? Yeah, a little over 3 to 1. Okay, so he's at almost a 7 to 1.
Yeah,
on the rep that does 33%. Okay, but again, for some reason, it's unsettling to have a 3 to 1 ROAS on not just one, but typically every new rep he brings in. So he's cycled through maybe 4 to 5 different reps that have all stayed within that lower,
all right, let's talk about this
range. And dude, drives me up a fucking wall.
Let's talk about this. This is an important topic.
What's happened with this guy? He stayed at the exact same fucking revenue number for 4 months in a row. Because as you know, hiring salespeople, staffing them, training them, and getting them to the point where you can confidently fill their calendars. How long of a process you think that is?
Oh, can I take this?
Let it rip.
All right. This is a really important topic. And a lot of the times the narrative needs to change around sales.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say a bunch of shit right now people don't want to hear.
Yeah, but we love doing that on this channel.
Listen, all of the answers are on the other side of acceptance. Just breathe through it, okay? Because what happens is people don't want to accept it as a truth, so they fight it for years and they just leave a shitload of money on the table when you could have just accepted the fact and then moved on and made a ton of money. So here it is. So first of all, you need to decide what problem you want to solve. Now, I'm not even doing a shameless plug right now, because if I was, I'd say, oh, just hire us and we'll help you with that. Let's forget about that for a second. If you're having that hard of a time duplicating your top performer and you've been trying for months to beat the close rate or beat the ROAS or whatever on the lower performing reps, but it's still profitable and you're good at marketing, dude, what freaking problem do you want to focus on solving? Just go freaking scale your market. Just forget about it for a second. You're not good at that. You can't solve it. Make a ton of money and solve the other problems in the business for the time being. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, and this is where the narrative change, I was saying, needs to change. Dude, it takes 60 to 90 days for a rep to really hit their true potential.
Yeah, 100%.
To really hit their true potential.
It takes 3 to 4 weeks just to fucking hire them and get them to the point where you can technically start confidently filling their calendars.
Well, think about it like this. You hire a sales rep. Let's say that they're in training for the first 7 to 10 days, okay? Yeah. Now they start taking calls. They need to build a pipeline. Call it 7 to 10 days. Let's say it's a 2-week sales cycle. You're a month in before, statistically speaking, you should even start seeing your first deals.
Yeah.
People don't understand that. And it's crazy. They're like, oh, Bobby's freaking hasn't closed anything. Maybe we should talk about firing them. I'm like, buddy, look at the freaking forecasted revenue report. He just built an entire pipeline over these last several weeks, right? You have to look at these things. And so what happens is first 30 days they're ramping, 30 to 60 they're stabilized, 60 to 90 is where they're going to show you their true potential. And I don't care how good, by the way, we don't hire inexperienced reps. I'm not talking about some green rep that you hired and taught how to sell. Yeah. These are people that are good at what they do, that have experience, but every offer is nuanced. They have to build a pipeline. They have to feel out what works in that situation. So what happens is people, they don't get the results right away. They fire them. They're in this vicious cycle.
Yeah. And you know what? You always hear about that opportunity cost where they lost X amount of dollars, but it's technically a hypothetical number. Nobody ever wants to look at that math and just base the reality like that inner circle member I gave you as an example. Dude, the actual lost dollars of that guy not being able to sustain, build, and add more of the 15% close reps has put him in a position where his actual lost dollars he did not capture, is already equated to about $400,000 to $500,000 in just revenue that could have been in his bank, could have cycled in and out of the business, spent it on whatever he wanted to reinvest it into, and instead he's just stayed at the exact same fucking level because he can't cycle through that problem faster and get through those situations you're looking for, all from like that anchor bias of the top rep.
Yep.
And just
here's another thing.
Every fucking rep against him, you know?
I see it all the time. Here's another thing. And again, by the way, these are the conversations I have so up front when I'm going into new engagements. We're not a magic pill. I have a chart. Everything I just said, by the way, I have a whole slide on. It's called like the phases of ramping or some shit like that.
What,
and
for this weekend?
Huh?
For this weekend?
I do show it this weekend, but I'm talking about my engagement deck. Like,
oh, okay.
Like,
yeah,
here's the funny thing. I've said this to you before. Like, if you guys ever been to the doctor and you're about to get surgery and they're like, hey, sign this waiver that says like, I have no guarantee, I know what I'm doing. You might freaking die. Side effects means that you'll lose your dick. Like all of these crazy things, right? That's like kind of the equivalent of what I do in my engagement decks these days.
Yeah.
The only reason why, it's not because we're not confident, it's not because we don't know what we're doing, is because I'm tired of dealing people with the most outrageous expectations. Yeah. So I want to go into a deal and I tell them like, dude, don't expect anything to change. First 30 days, we're just integrating. For next couple months, they're starting to scale. Like I go so deep and I'm like, don't hire us if your expectations are different than this. So here's what happens. They're like, I think they think it's like some kind of Jedi mind trick of like, oh, he's like reverse psychology sales.
Yeah.
So they hire me. And then like a couple weeks later, they're like, why aren't you guys making more money? I'm like, dude, don't you remember the hour-long slideshow I gave you? They think it's like some reverse psychology shit. But
you probably got to add that in there as a line. This is not reverse psychology.
This is not a sales tactic. Yeah. So funny. But anyways, listen to this.
I deal with that same shit, yeah.
Listen to this. So one of the things I like to explain to people is in sales. Now, I will say, and again, guys, like this is a core competency of ours. We are prolific recruiters. Yeah. Very good in talent acquisition.
Yeah, you always bring great A players to the teams.
Thank you. And we just bring really good talent. I have a director of talent acquisition. She's very good. She doesn't miss. Her prior role, she recruited 600 sales reps in 18 months. Like, she's just good. My team is just good, and we do things at a very high level of, you know, standards, like you said. And so we treat our talent acquisition quite literally more seriously than a lot of companies treat customer acquisition. The quote unquote ad copy, the job descriptions, the VSLs, the funnels, the landing pages, the case studies, the testimonials, like it's very in depth, very competitive interview process, high friction. By the way, people are always afraid in a really high friction sales interview process that you're going to lose top talent and because there's too much friction. Dude, sales is different, man. A players, they want to see that shit.
Yeah, 100%.
They're like, damn, I might not get this job. Now I have to get this job. You know, they look at it as the sales process itself, which as an employer is what we want. So it works really well. And then we have an entire skills assessment process. They have to watch several hours of training to prepare for the skills assessment. Then they do this skills assessment. They have to get a certain grade, then they're placed on an account. Okay, this is the process. Why did I say all that? Because even with all of that, in all of the freaking touch points in the submission video and the multiple interviews and the skills assessment, everything I just explained, still sometimes we can hire somebody that doesn't perform.
Yeah.
They don't turn out to be a winner. And here's how I compare.
You cycle those kind of people in and out very quickly. You know, you do a great job of firing the wrong people that slip through the cracks.
You have to.
There's very few that I've ever seen.
What do they
like
say?
That,
hire slow, fire fast. Like,
Yep.
like times that rule by 10 in sales.
Yeah.
But here's the analogy I like to give, right? Like, think about marketing. When you're scaling campaigns, do you expect every campaign or every ad to be a top performer? No, that would be absolutely crazy. Well, what do you do to mitigate against the risk? You have a bunch of ads, you have a bunch of campaigns, give a little bit of spend to all of them, scale the top performers.
Yeah.
It's the same in sales. We hire a bunch of people, we do our best, we have a very high friction process, We put them, not only do they have to pass the skills assessment to get hired, then when they go through training, they have to pass a actual skills assessment for the brand they're placed on, mock sales call for the brand they're placed on, a written skills assessment for product knowledge, and a written skills assessment for process knowledge. They have to pass all three of those things. Sometimes they still suck. It happens. I don't know why, right? It's sales. It's hard to see like how they're going to carry a pipeline and how there's a lot of things that you can't see in an interview process, right? Yeah. Unless you spend months and now you have a different problem. Where I'm going with that though is this still happens. It's part of the game and people just need to accept that. Like if you hired a sales rep and you did all of those things right and you had really good onboarding, you had really good training, they didn't make it, you didn't fail. You had to go through that. You have to go through that to end up finding this like team of rock stars. You're not going to find a team of gold by like avoiding hiring any of the ones that don't make it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And by the way, this is a great example of what we're talking about with Josh's standards within his organization. You can't name me one fucking sales organization out there that does remotely close to what Josh does. Even if, and this is also very important to reflect on, even if in your own company you have an internal sales team, you don't do that shit in your company, okay? So to be clear, this is why you work with guys like this. And you'll also find the link down in the description for Josh's services. Again, company's called Wires from Strangers. You can check them out. Can't stress it enough. There's truly nothing better. You've gotten a glimpse and an insight, okay, into the level that Josh operates at. Hopefully you've got some great little bits out of it that are going to put you on game and take you to the next level within your company and your organization. Big shout out to Josh for coming on here and just D1 yapping with me here today. We're going to go and feed Josh some food. You know why? Because he landed and we came straight here to put you guys on.
Straight from the airport.
We got to feed this boy, man.
Cool.
But anyway, Josh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You want to leave these people with an outro of some kind? What do you want to hit them with?
Yeah, I don't know. Sales operations is complex. It's very nuanced. And I think that people just lose so much money trying to guess at this stuff instead of hiring an expert. And there's the shameless plug, like, anytime anybody wants to hem and haw around what we charge, I guarantee you lose way more money just because the cost of ignorance. So I respect you a lot, Jeremy. One of the most prolific marketers in our time, and I appreciate you doing this with me, man.
Thank you. And thank you, the viewer, for watching. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and press that subscribe button. Every video on this channel is dedicated to hitting $1 million months and just handing down the lessons from the people that guys like us have worked with, that have been there, done that, and just trying to put them into these little bite-sized videos just for you. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much. And if you're not a part of the inner circle and you're rich, trying to get a fuckload richer, click that link in the description. Make sure you guys also check out Josh's link down in the description for the Wires from Strangers offer. And I want to be very fair in openly disclosing, you got to be a great deal in order for him to take you on, just as any great organization, okay? It's a relatively high friction process. To be clear, don't even click the fucking link if you're like low couple $100,000 a month. You want to describe to him real quick, just as like a final thing, like what an ideal deal is for you, so we mitigate
actually, it's a good point to end on, and here's why. The number one thing that I look for, first of all, the basics. You have to have a good offer. I don't sell anything I don't believe in. If I don't think it's an irresistible offer, I don't want to touch it. If it doesn't have integrity, I want nothing to do with it. And I'll tell you, actually, this is worth saying as we close out. Jeremy will tell you, we had a deal that we took on, and the deal did several $1 million a month, okay? And I heard that there were some things going on in fulfillment that not only created a lot of liability for that company, but I didn't want my team to look anybody in the eyes anymore and sell this thing knowing that it wasn't being fulfilled on. Multi-million-dollar a month deal, I quit same day. We terminated that agreement. Jeremy was there. He was like, why the hell are you leaving? And I was like, this is why. I want nothing to do with it. So it has to have integrity is the point. Jeremy's seen me do that with multiple different deals. And then a big thing, like I said, the basics. You have to have good marketing. You have to put in the content. You have to do all these things. But at the end of the day, I want to work with good people and I want to have that alignment. I don't want to work with people with crazy expectations. I want to work with people that we could have mutual respect and people that are serious about making money and want to scale. And then lastly, like Jeremy said, typically right around that $200,000 mark, $200,000 a month mark is when you would be in a really good position for us to come in and pour fuel on the fire. If you're at zero revenue, if you're pre-revenue, it's not time. If you're around that $100,000 a month, I'll have a conversation and we could see if it's something we'd help with.
Nice. Ripe and ready for the picking. All right, cool. Go out there and get richer. Talk soon.